Welcome to the You Matter podcast, where we host interesting people and have enlightening conversations. My name is Ned Burwell, and I'll be your host.
Welcome, everybody. I'm here with a special guest. His name is Dr. Sean Botha, and he's a fairly interesting guy, and I'm sure you're all going to find out why. See, he has a few things. He wears a few hats. He's got a few things on the go. He's a film producer. He writes books. He created a project called the Listening Project, which I'm deeply fascinated about. He's also a musician and along with many other things. And we're going to sort of dive into that here today with Sean. But what really drew me to you to do this interview was listening. I find that incredibly interesting because life is a constant creation, and we're created. Everything around us is a creation, and I think our purpose and what brings meaning in life is participating in creating your life. So how do we become the best creators? I think it's by deeply listening to ourselves, listening to our environment, listening to whatever shows up in our lives. So I'm just, like I say, I can't wait to hear what you have to say on listening and learning a few things from you today, Sean. So welcome.
So thank you. It's nice to be here. So yes, it's I think there's so much to cover when it comes to listening. But I think there's always a beginning with listening, but I don't think there's ever an end. But there's always a beginning. And that's something that I've kind of realized when I was doing my research into sound and silence here in Australia. So it was quite fascinating. I didn't know where the work would take me. And then by the end of it, my entire life had changed. So there was a lot to unpack. There was a lot of information to unpack and a lot of things about myself that kind of came up in the process, which was quite interesting itself.
Yeah, I think that's one of the wonderful qualities of listening is that we learn things that we may not have been conscious of before, right?
Yes. I think that's the big thing. I don't think we realize how deep we go when we do listen. I mean, all of us, we listen on the surface, and that surface is cluttered with noise and all these different sounds 24 hours a day, and it doesn't stop. And even when we're sleeping, our brain is still listening. So there's always something going on in the background. The question is what do we do with that information? How do we process it? And once we've processed that information, where does it go? And I think that's one question that I don't have a straightforward answer to. But what I do know is that it's what we make of it, and it's what happens in our actions, in our energy, and in our relationships that shows how we're actually processing that information, if that makes sense. So, because it happens on so many different levels, I mean, to take it basically to a point where it's easy to talk about is starting with my research, and I was quite literally having to analyze music, and I had to really listen because I was trying to find where sounds started in a piece of music, where it stopped, and then I had to do the same thing to see if I could find the same moments of silence in a piece of music. And I went so deep into any piece of music that I realized, whoa, this is not just my brain listening. My entire body is engaging with what's happening on my computer. And then I was like, okay, now this piece of music, there's silence in there, but it's like this split second. It was an absolute split second. And I thought to myself, okay, so if I could pick up on a split second, what am I missing? And then I had to go back to John Cage, who's an American composer. And he looked into silence, and he's the one who coined the phrase, there's no such thing as silence. And that forced me to listen more and speak less. Because when we're listening...
Which is a slogan on your website, is to listen more, speak less.
Yes, and I think that's the thing. Because there's more information in what we do, in our actions, in how we move our body in a conversation. And how we move our body in a conversation gives so much more valuable feedback to the other person.
That's right.
That is the thing that creates this back and forth between people.
So you say that once you started to listen more deeply, you could feel what you're listening to in your body, and you talk about listening as an energy. What about say a room that you're sitting in is not the spaces we occupy full of information from it listening to us, to all the interactions that have happened in that room?
Yes, that is like if I have to think of a way to kind of put that into words, it's like these units of energy that's constantly around us. I know Dr. Joe Dispenza does it really well in his meditations when he says, become aware of the space around you, the space in your throat, or the space around your body. And then he actually says to you, pay attention to the energy that's in that space. So when we're sitting in a room and we're surrounded with all that energy, and we're surrounded by probably 2 or 3 sounds within that space, there's information in that. And it's about how you connect with that information. And just to connect with it on a superficial level is not enough, because then you're missing the point of what life is about. It's about those deeper connections, and you can only get to that by listening. You can't get to that by talking and talking and talking and talking. So, because words, it interferes with the stillness, and it interferes with the energy.
No, I say that because people come to my office, and they say they feel comfortable suddenly. They feel good in this space. And I often think that it's because the room is listening, and it's something that has crossed my mind. And there's a lot of love in this space, and just the room is listening. And when they come in, if they listen to the space, it's infused with love. So
yes, I think that's definitely part of it. When there's no love in a space, you can feel it. When there's tension, when there's stress or friction, you can feel it. And those elements interferes with how somebody is going to feel when they walk into a space. And I think that's where the neurodiverse conversation starts to become very interesting, because I have a theory. My theory is that people who are neurodiverse are 10 times more sensitive to the energies around them.
Mm-hmm.
So what they can pick up in their immediate environment is 100% more than a neurotypical person. So just because somebody who is neurodiverse have this energy that goes up and down and up and down and up and down the whole time, that does not mean that they are not listening.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are picking up on so much more than what a neurotypical person does.
So let me back
So
you up there. For the listeners that may not understand what neurodiverse is, could you just give us a quick explanation of what that is?
it means that their brain is wired differently and it processes information differently. In most cases, executive function in a neurodiverse brain has shorter attention spans in comparison to a neurotypical person whose brain has all the fittings work. They can make decisions, they can focus on something, get it done, get 100% for a task if they're at university, and they can move on to the next thing, whether it's within a month or a year. Whereas for a neurodiverse person, they're like, for 20 seconds or maybe 10 minutes, they're doing one thing, and then with no warning, something else comes in, you drop all of that and you're on to the next thing.
Okay.
And if that's not happening, your brain is constantly telling you things. Whether it's true or untrue doesn't matter. It's constantly talking to you and it does not stop.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the big difference. Whereas neurotypical people, they have a lot of things going for them, and their brain can process things in a far more structured way, so to speak. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of sides to those coins. So, and I think the conversation just needs to be continue to happen in that space, so
Mm-hmm.
to speak. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks for summing that up for me. Now, you had said you were talking about deep listening, or you mentioned deep listening, and from
Yeah.
watching one of your videos, you learned that term from another person. What is deep listening, and how is that? How can we practice that in our lives?
Okay, so deep listening originates from the indigenous cultures of Australia. And there was a American composer and researcher, Pauline Oliveros, who looked into the process of listening. She must have been heavily influenced by the indigenous cultures of Australia. And she ended up coining the phrase deep listening. And as a result, what comes out of deep listening is the fact that there's a deep awareness. And a lot of people nowadays talk about mindfulness, but with deep listening, it's more than that. It's that awareness that I've just mentioned. But together with that, it's that ability to sit within an environment and allow all the information that's coming in, whether it's from your natural environment or from a conversation. What happens is when you go through that process is you're allowing that information to be absorbed further than just your brain.
Okay.
So you're basically making that energetic effort to allow that information to go into your heart, into your lungs, and into the rest of your body. But you're consciously allowing that to happen. So
Okay.
that's my explanation of it. But when you're looking at it in academic terms, it becomes a very boring topic, because the academic world wants to keep it in a space where we're attaching it to ideas of active listening or effective listening or cultural listening, and then some. Because that's the comfort space that the academic world works in. But when you take all of that away, when you strip it all away, it's multisensory.
Okay.
Because deep listening requires of you to use all your senses. And that starts with our ears. What we can feel, what we can see, what we can touch, what we can taste, what we can smell. All of that is part of a conversation, or part of a natural world when we're really doing deep listening. So
That's fascinating, and it just sort of stimulates something in me. The way you explain that, I'm going to start practicing that with my clients, and what can I feel in this moment? What can I smell in this moment? Can I taste the energy of this experience happening?
And that's the thing, because I had the strangest thing when I did my honors studies. I bought this book, quite literally. It was a book on listening. It's written by Eric Clark, and I was sitting in a waiting space outside of a lecture room with a couple of people, and this one fellow student of mine, she was sitting next to me, and I said to her, I love this book. I feel like I can just eat it all up. I feel like I can just shove the book into my mouth and just eat it.
Yeah.
And she thought I was absolutely nuts. And we had a good laugh over it. But the more I thought about it is when you find something that's giving you so much information that you feel you can use it all up and you just want to absorb it all, it does take on that multisensory idea, because the information, when you're reading it, you're hearing it, you're seeing it, you're touching it. And if you allow yourself in your brain to take it a little bit further, it is as if you can taste it. Yeah. It is as if you can smell the words coming off the page. And it's the same with music.
Well,
I've had music.
If you give us a lot of information, sometimes people say, let me digest that. There's an example, right? I need to digest that for a minute.
It's quite an interesting it's an interesting way of saying it, and people say it quite loosely. But I think sometimes we forget that there's something going on deeper beyond that point. And I think that's the thing with listening as well, and the thing with silence. I don't like the word silence. I prefer to call it stillness. But the reason why I'm mentioning those three is because just underneath the surface, there are these sub-layers to the process. So if somebody is saying, it's like, I have to digest what you've just said, it means that they only listened up to a point, but now there's other information their brain is trying to access, so it has to go deeper. So where does it go to?
Yeah.
And only the person who's saying, I have to digest that information, will be saying that, because there's a block, there's some kind of block that's stopping them from going deeper. And only they will know what the block is, either subconsciously or consciously. So
Or are
Nobody
they
can tell them.
saying that I want to take that into my body a little deeper and feel what kind of information comes forward?
Precisely. So I had this conversation with a client the other week, and she was telling me about a friend who she had lost. And because there was just the way life had evolved for my client and the friend, there was just distance that came between them. And what was interesting is I didn't say anything, I just allowed her to talk. And the more she explained what had happened, the more I could quite literally feel my body absorbing the pain, the emotional pain that she had experienced, losing this friendship. I could literally feel it in my chest. So by the
Mhm.
time I had left the client, it was like I had to get myself out of a mindset. My brain and my body had just gone down this rabbit hole.
Mhm.
And I still can't believe it's been almost a fortnight since that conversation, and I still don't understand how my body was capable of doing that.
Mhm.
And I couldn't say anything because this specific client, she talks once and you know, and then she goes like a freight train. She just keeps going. So all you can do is listen.
Yeah.
So you can't interrupt because she's still processing her emotions.
Mhm.
And then you realize, but hold on, I'm also processing the same emotions, and there's a connection there. So what do I do with that connection?
That's right. And I've had that experience myself many times and doing mentoring sessions with somebody. They leave, they feel great. And I have absorbed a lot of that energy that was coming out of them and then felt really awful. And I talked to a friend of mine who's a paramedic, and I say, what do you do? Like if you work this job and you see horrific things all the time, how do you shield yourself from not feeling awful? And he said, I have to be responsible for not going into my feelings while
Yeah.
I'm working. And
Yes.
it can be very tricky to do, though.
It can be tricky to do, and I think that's where I know on social media at the moment there's a lot of talking around, protect your energy, be very picky with who you surround yourself with. But sometimes it's easier said than done. And I
Mhm.
think that's where the multi-sensory approach to situations really comes in handy because um, y you kind of want to trust your body to tell you, okay, hold on, we need to just back off a little bit here and maybe, not step over that little line in the sand from an
Okay.
energetic perspective or from a emotional perspective, but even from that sense of you can feel what the other person is feeling. So you kind of have to, but to be able to do that, you need to know yourself really well. And a way to know yourself really well is to create a healthy connection between your physical body and your brain.
Mhm.
And that's again where the listening process comes into it because technology at the moment is interfering with that coherence and connection between the physical body and the brain. So we kind of it's I feel like we need to be willing to retrain our brain to pay attention to what our body is telling us. And a way to
Mhm.
do that is to go deeper with our listening processes and
Mhm.
going deeper with how we interact with the energies and the people around us.
That's right. So I've been waiting with bated breath. I want to ask you about the Listen program. You created this program, and it's a course that people can take. Give us a synopsis of what that's all about.
Okay, so the Listen program comes from my listening processes when I did my research. And what I noticed was I was going from the outside in. So in academic terms, we're talking about deductive reasoning and reductive reasoning. And so those are very fancy words to say what's the process of understanding a topic. So what I did, unbeknownst to myself, was I was using the same principle where you're listening to everything around you to begin with. And you try and find out what's all the stuff that's in your environment. And that's where the Listen program started. That's the origin point for the Listen program. Because we are surrounded by sound 24 hours a day, what do we do with it? How do we navigate it? And how does that influence how we listen? So when you start at that point, you've already opened up your brain a little bit more to understanding what's happening in your life, right? So then it just takes on 6 more steps, and those 6 more steps basically asks you to focus in on one sound, just like I had to focus in on one sound in a piece of music to understand how that sound was behaving. In the Listen program, what happens is you pick a sound, you focus in on that, and by doing that, you're filtering away and filtering out all the other sounds around you. And what you then do is you take that sound and you allow your body to absorb it.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does, what's wonderful about it is it has so many wonderful outcomes that some of it I haven't even explored yet. But some of the first things that I've noticed is some people fall asleep using the program. I've noticed other people can focus better. Other people just find that their stress reduces. And for me nowadays, I'm finding I feel very grounded when I do the program.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I can navigate life just a little bit better. And I think once I found that out, I was like, I've got to help people because this is what people need. In the 21st century, with all the stuff that we're surrounded with, this is something that people need, not just people in the neurodiverse community, but people from all walks of life, health sector, the arts sector, music sector. You know, it just has so much applicability in our daily lives, and it can help so many people feel more connected with each other. So I got to share it. So the program itself, it's so simple. It is probably, it's one of those programs that makes you completely rethink everything you know about listening, but it also helps you to reset. I think that's the other big thing.
Sure.
And I think we need that reset, considering how the world is changing and the fact that technology is advancing. People need a way to unplug.
Mm-hmm. One thing I noticed, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
No, that's okay. I just think that that need to unplug and that need to reset is becoming more important.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. And, one thing that I noticed when I was going through your material is that you were sharing, like, in your videos on YouTube, you were sharing a lot about how to come into single pointedness without being in a meditative state where, because meditation brings us into that single pointedness where we learn to just relax or focus on one thing. And when we do that, we start to become aware of everything. And it's a really powerful tool in meditation when you can just, if the mind is racing, we just focus on one thing. We come into single pointedness. But I noticed that your material that I was listening to, has a really powerful way of guiding people to come into that single focus, which brings a heightened sense of awareness to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, that's a, I don't know how to, sorry, my brain is getting stuck now. But what I find interesting, with the process itself is it's three things. As I mentioned before, it creates that connection between the brain and the body. But in a weird way, it also teaches people how to meditate. It's like that little step just before meditation. So it's like this in between. It's like a little gateway. So, and I never thought about it that way. I just thought, I thought to myself, okay, this is straightforward. This is how you do it. This is what you can get out of it. And then the more I talk about it, the more I realize, hold on, if I really look at it on a practical scale, it's very energy based, but at the same time, it simplifies everything around you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about simplifying things. It's not about making life more complex. It's about making listening more simple, more fundamental, more it's like a tree. It's like when you're planting a tree, you stick the tree in the ground and you want it to take root, you want it to grow all those parts of it that it can, get everything out of the ground that it needs. And it feels like the program does a similar thing where it kind of, it grounds you. And at the same time, it's like a feeding ground for everything else that you need. So it's like a fundamental building block itself, and everything else happens around it. And as the more you do it, the easier it gets, the easier your relationships become, the easier it becomes to understand the other person that's standing across from you. So,
because my background is I used to be in a Shia monk, and so I practiced lots of meditation, and the goal was to always be in that meditative state with our eyes open, eyes closed, continue to live your life. And I see some of the things that you're offering similar to some of my trainings on how to hold that presence awareness of the stillness and the environment around you. You become like a more open vessel to hear, to see, to feel more deeply.
Precisely. And eventually what happens is the more we practice that awareness, the more you start to realize that you're part of a universe. You're part of the entire universe, and that everything you're feeling and hearing it's like it leaves traces of itself behind in the universe, not just on this planet. It's
Mm-hmm.
these small little traces of itself.
Yeah.
And some of the traces are smaller, some of it is bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this absolute plethora of possibilities and sounds and layers of not just people, but of every living, breathing thing that we find on this planet and in space. It's all connected, and you just want to find out more and more and more about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think bringing that presence awareness in a constantly throughout your life, you become more aware and more aware of so many more things, like things that are very subtle, things you wouldn't normally notice.
Yes. It's interesting that you're saying that. I went for a walk the other day, and we've got a lake where I live, and we always have signs up that says beware of the snakes, because we've got, some scary snakes that live here in Australia. Anyways, so I was on this walk, right? And I can't remember in what direction I was going, but I could hear this something scuttling off in the bushes. And my intuition told me that was a snake and it just ran away from you. Because you were too close to it. So I can be completely off the mark. It could have been a blue-tongued lizard for all I know. But all I know is that just the energy shift by walking past that specific spot told
Mm-hmm.
me there was something there. It saw me and it went, nah, not in the mood. I'm leaving. And
Yeah.
that's what I heard. So, and then in complete contrast to that, I was filming a video again of the same area, and you could hear these small sounds of the birds singing, surrounded by all these big sounds of the cars and the wind and everything else going on around it. So it kind of feeds into that idea of that awareness of everything, not just all the obvious things that's happening around us.
Mm-hmm.
There's such small things that goes on. And I always wonder, can people hear that? Can people hear
Mm-hmm.
that small little sound?
Well, here's an interesting thing, Sean. When I took vows to be an Ashaya monk, well, I had to go into silence for 3 days. And so for 3 days, I was not allowed to speak to anyone, to look anyone in the eye. I just had to kind of recite my vows. Now, by the third day, the silence is like becoming sweeter and sweeter, or the stillness is rising up more and more intensely in me. The experience sort of unpacked itself and expanded. Now, the first time I spoke words to my teacher, who was a Maharishi, I could literally feel energy leaving my body. And then after the vows were done, we had a big feast, and I was speaking with everyone in the room, and I could really sense how much energy was leaving my body from speaking. So when I read that term on your website, listen more, speak less, I think that you're really saying something there, because in that experience I had, I could literally feel so much energy leaving my body, and my awareness sort of just shrunk a little bit by expelling so much.
That's really interesting because in a weird way, I can connect with what you're saying, because I have so many times and so many days where my brain I don't say it out loud, but my brain, on a good day, when I don't have any music playing, don't have the television on, and there's just all this general stuff going on around me, and my brain just goes, "Can everybody just be quiet? I'm trying to listen." And I think to myself, "But what are you listening to?" And then and then I and then I have to say to myself, "But I'm listening to the universe. I'm listening to the stillness. I'm listening to the things that only my subconscious can hear, because the answers that I'm looking for is in there. It's not in the music. It's not in the sound. It's not in my conversations with people. It's in that space where we think nothing is happening, but everything is happening in there. It's that energy. It's that space where it's like a space that nobody can touch."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing with deep listening, is that you're going into spaces that nobody can touch, nobody can reach into it, nobody can take it away from you.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I say nobody can touch it, nobody can reach it, I think what my brain is trying to say is that what I'm listening to is so different from what somebody else listens to. And the difference is, or the explanation is that my space and my stillness is different from another person's space and their stillness. And you have to equate the stillness with energy, and you have to attach that to the beginning.
Okay.
And then I hear my brain going, "But what beginning?" People who know me will probably think, "No, Sean has really, really gone off some really strange tangent. He's gotten weirder by the minute." And I think to myself, but it's physics. When we're looking at physics, we're trying to explain the beginning of the universe, and maybe that's the beginning that I'm trying to find.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what everybody is trying to find, but they don't know how to get there.
Well, the thing is that knowing is the end of learning quite often, because you think you know and you stop searching. So I love your curiosity, and I think curiosity is a virtue to live by, and so I applaud your willingness to just to keep listening. There's more here. Your spirit, your soul, your intuition, it knows there's more for you. So I applaud that. In one way
Yeah.
I've practiced listening is through my writing. So quite often when I write, I've written a handful of books, and when I write, more often than not, when I'm writing nonfiction, I ask myself questions my mind can't answer. And then so I use bottom to top processing. Instead of going from what I know to what I don't know, I start it with what I don't know and I answer the question. So, and again, you start to feel a little crazy, because if you ask a question, I feel like the answer is absolutely in you. I don't think you can ask the question without the answer. And it's been such a fascinating process of listening to the stillness in me to get these answers for questions my mind can't answer.
Yeah. That is, I think when we're capable of doing that, then we have to, I think, I don't want to put an obsolete on it, but I think when you get to that point, you want to start to share what you've experienced with other people, because I think quite naturally, as human beings, when you get to that point, you want other people to have their own unique experience. So, and you want to share your experience with them so that they can try and go deeper and deeper and deeper. Because I feel that there are still so many people who's missing out on aspects of life that is far more important than chasing the almighty dollar. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, I can sit here and say, yeah, I mean, I can do with a little bit of extra money, all of us can. But at the end of the day, when when it's your time to go, money is not going to be the determining factor of what's happening with you once your time is up. So I think it becomes this natural process of wanting to share everything that you've gone through with other people so that they can, at some point, take over where your work has left off and take it further. I think that's the thing. You want people to have the tools to take the work further so that we can get the answers to questions that hasn't been asked yet.
that's right. That's
So
so wonderful. I couldn't agree more.
I just wish that in my perfect world, um I wish I could make things and life better and easier for everybody around me, because I feel that if I can do that, then I've done what I'm supposed to be doing. And I don't think my brain will be able to settle for anything less than that.
Mhm.
I want to know that I've tried everything to try and help, I think.
Mhm.
And I didn't, when I put it in that framework, all the research that I've done makes sense, because everything we research has an origin, and that origin goes back to energy, and that energy goes back into physics, goes back into the universe, and it all links back up to the process of listening.
Yeah.
I actually, I actually, um, was in a conversation with somebody else a couple of weeks ago, and I said to the guy, I wonder what God must have heard before he created the universe. And if he did hear something, what did he hear? What
Mhm.
did God hear? And I think that should be part of the question of, when did the universe begin and how did it begin? I think that's part of the answer.
Mhm.
But to
When
get
you
to that
when you
answer, we have to listen.
when you hear about the origin, teachings about the first primordial sound, or in a Christian sense, in the beginning was the word. Everything starts out with a word or a vibration, a sound. You know,
Yeah.
it's quite fascinating that you can dial that back in a few different philosophies. It shows up in several different things, right?
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely. I I've got a social media post saved of an American scientist where he talks about music and energy, and he relates that to the fabric of the universe. But I can't remember the scientist's name right now. And I actually need to write down what he said, because it's all going into this work that I'm putting together around the Listen program itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I thought to myself, look, there's so much more around it, so I need to start writing a book. So I'm trying to pull all these threads together so that it could all make sense to whoever comes across the work. So so the physics component to it is quite interesting. But I think, at the end of the day, it's about how deep you go and how far you're willing to go.
Mhm.
And I think how far somebody is willing to go will determine how their relationships are and what their relationships with people and animals will look like. Because unfortunately, there will always be people who only wants to live on the surface of life.
Mhm.
And then there's others who they want to go deeper.
Absolutely. And I think it takes a lot of courage to step outside of the status quo and to be curious enough to listen for things or to ask questions that we assume we already know. I think it takes a lot of courage to continuously ask sometimes the same questions. And I find myself repeatedly asking myself some of the same questions. And each time I find that I don't know if I'm listening more deeply each time I ask the same question, but the answers are always changing. And it's very fascinating to me. So my curiosity is never really fully satisfied, because if the answer is always going to change, it's like, okay, let's ask that question again and listen. But this time
It makes
I'm going
me,
to have to listen deeper.
yes, it makes me think of that saying that says that everything is in flux, nothing stays still.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and this is just my take on it, but I think the reason why the answers are always changing is because energy is always changing, and the answers are just a form of energy, and
It's a
because that's
reflection
always
of,
changing.
so it's expressive of where the consciousness is right now, where the
Yeah.
energy is right now. Okay. I like that. I like that a lot. I think, Sean, if I came back and if I circled back to you in about 10 years, I, I think you're going to be a person that moves the needle. And I've met a lot of people in life where you could circle back in 20 years and the needle hasn't moved. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Cool.
kudos to you. How can people get a hold of you if they want to take this listening program that you offer? And where do you offer that?
Okay, so at the moment it's offered online, and the best way to contact me is via email, and that's HSBothaProductions@gmail.com. And yeah, that's the long and short of it. So at the moment it's online, specifically for for people in other countries.
Do you have any closing thoughts or things you want to share before we bring this to an end?
I think I think I would say is just listen. Just, turn off your phone, put away your computer, your iPads, and just listen to what's going on around you, because there's so much that we can learn from not just people, but from our natural world. And
Mhm.
the way to learn from that is to listen. We can't
Mhm.
not listen. And if anybody wants to go deeper, just reach out. I'm always there.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sean Botha, for coming on to the You Matter podcast today. I think your message is so valuable and needed, and especially at this time. So I hope everybody out there has enjoyed this episode. There will be some links in the show notes for you to click onto if you'd like to see more of Sean's work. It's certainly fascinating. I've spent a few days going through his videos, and I think the person who has listened has something to say. So thank you for all your words today. I appreciate you coming on. And to
Well,
everybody
it's been
else,
fun.
it has
Awesome.
certainly
Thank you
has.
for having me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Take care and goodbye.
Will do.
Thank you for taking time to listen. Stay tuned for our next episode of the You Matter podcast. Have a wonderful day.